Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. I'm Andrea Salmon and our presenter today is Jane Bridgman. Today we'll be looking at living well with multiple sclerosis, something that I'm sure you're all interested in. We start all our programs by acknowledging and paying respect to the traditional custodians, past, present and emerging, on whose lands we meet today, no matter where we're dialing in from. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and the relationship of Aboriginal people to country. And we respect the cultural authority of the elders in each community. It's my pleasure today to introduce you to Jane Bridgman, if you haven't already met Jane. Jane's a registered nurse with over 6 years experience in disability and aged care, progressive neurological conditions and primary health care. Jane's also an internationally certified MS nurse and works with us as an MS nurse advisor. MS nurse advisors, of which Jane is one of two, Jane and Bridie, are available for phone consultations about anything that concerns you regarding your MS. So thank you, Jane. I'm going to get you to turn on your camera so we can say hi. Okay, Jane. And I'll just sit here quietly in the background. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for joining us this morning. I hope you're nice and comfortable and snugged and rugged up and have a cuppa. I've also got some green tea here. So let's get started at living well with MS. We're going to look at what is health and well-being, and I think it's good to get a bit of an understanding about this before we figure out, are we living well? So what does it mean to live well though? We're also going to do a bit of a check-in to see how you're going at the moment. We're going to look at some of the different components of health and some MS specific medication information as well, and we're going to look at some of the barriers to living well that we all might come across and look at some top tips as well. So let's have a look at what is health and well-being. The World Health Organization defines this as a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. The Oxford Dictionary definition of well-being is the state of being comfortable, healthy or happy. The way that I've interpreted that is to mean it's not just the absence of bad that we're looking for in health, but it's actually the presence of good. And so I think that's a good point to take away when we're thinking about what part of all of this is in our control and what can we actually influence. So let's have a look at the components of health. Quite often we would think that the components of health would just be physical health, and we often do focus on that, but we also have many other types of health. There's our intellectual health, our social health. At the moment, a lot of us are experiencing isolation due to COVID, so our social health has dramatically dropped. We also have environmental health, spiritual health, and emotional health. How much of your overall health is made up of each of these components can change over time, and it's different for everybody. But overall, we are looking for optimal health in all of these areas together. So what does it mean to live well? There are many kind of definitions of this. Some people say it's a feeling. Some people say it's a way of being in the world. The best definition I could find was that it's about engaging with life in a meaningful and fulfilling way. It is a moving feast though, and sometimes you may feel better than others. Not many people are living their best life at the moment due to the stresses of COVID, but some people may be finding some parts of their health are better than others. It does change. It is about looking for a useful and meaningful life that you actually want to have. So let's do a bit of a self check-in at the moment to think, how are you going with your health? There's many fancy ways to do this and screening tools and, ratings out of 10, but I thought we'll just take a moment to run a poll and have a look at how you are actually going at the moment.
Thanks, Jane. Yep, so here's this poll which asks the question, how are you going at the moment? So you might respond, I'm doing great, but I'm always interested in other ideas. Or you might be thinking, I'm feeling okay, but there's always room for improvement. Or maybe you're unsure how to put it into words. Or maybe you need inspiration, and so ideas are welcome. So as we practiced before we started, hover your mouse over those answers, and you can choose the answer that responds or applies most closely to how you're feeling. And feel free to pop a comment in the question area as well. So I can see that half the group have responded to that. It's great to participate in the polls. It's a way, if we were in a room together, we'd be doing a show of hands. We'd be getting a bit of a sense of how the room's feeling and how individuals are tracking with how they're going at the moment. So pop in an answer. You'll be interested to see the rest of the group and how they answer as well. So using your mouse, hovering over the answer that applies most closely to how you're feeling, but also feeling free to put in a comment in the question area. I'll close that off and I'll show you the results. So 62% feeling okay, but there's room for improvement. 15% of people online today a bit unsure how to put it into words, and 23% feeling that they need inspiration and ideas are welcome. So you're in the right place.
I think that's really normal that quite a few of us would need some inspiration at the moment. I think many of us are having peaks and troughs in our health, and that's so normal. And I'm really glad that you've taken the time to do this for your health as well. Let's look at some of the expectations for our health. Where do you want to be in terms of your health status? For some of us, our expectations of our health and well-being may be too low, so we're not really setting the standard that high for ourselves, and perhaps we could benefit from lifting that a little bit. But for some of us, it can actually be too high. So that can cause stress for us as well if we're expecting too much of ourselves, not only with our physical health, but our mental health and our social health. That can be a lot. So we want to be mindful of those unrealistic expectations and be mindful that everyone is different. Everyone's MS is different, but in life we have differences as well, and we have to be mindful not to compare. I love this little picture that I've put up on the screen because so often on social media or when we're presenting ourselves in the community, we may look a little bit more like the dog on the right. When we're at home, we look more like the scruffy one on the left, and up until about 2 hours ago, I look more like the scruffy one too. So it is really good to know that everyone is different, but also we want to be mindful not to compare. Comparison is the thief of joy, so we want to be mindful of that. Let's have a look at physical health. This is a really large component of what makes up most of our health. We do want to be looking at a healthy, well-balanced diet. That's so important. And I'm not going to be going into specifics of each thing that we cover today. This is going to be a really broad overview. Proper sleep is so important. We know that many people with MS will have sleep issues. They may have difficulty in falling asleep because of perhaps symptoms that are disruptive or uncomfortable. You may not be able to sleep through the night, or you may be waking up too early. So having proper sleep is so important and getting enough of it. Being physically active is very beneficial, especially throughout the day, and exercise has so many benefits, not just on our physical health, but on all the other parts of our health as well. We want to be mindful of some unhealthy habits too. Things like smoking certainly are not good for our general health, but are even worse in MS. Alcohol as well is something that is harmful to the body and should be consumed in moderation, and of course illicit drugs as well. We do really want to think about what we are putting into our body, because there is that kind of old saying of putting junk in and we get junk out. So we do want to be really mindful of how we are treating our body. I've put here an overview of some standard health screenings as well. just to give you an idea of perhaps what you could be working with your GP. So how often you should see your GP is different for each person, but a minimum once a year, I would say, is probably a good idea. If you are someone that does need to go to the GP quite a lot, you may consider having routine appointments booked in, and it doesn't necessarily need to be every week or every month, but you may have an appointment booked every 3 months or every 2 months, and that's a good way of having a place where you can know that you can unpack all those issues. So you might write down on a list of all the things that you're concerned about and know, oh, okay, well, in 4 weeks' time, I'll see my GP about that. We also want to work with the GP to look at some other things, like if we have high blood pressure or diabetes is a big thing that we need to manage. We also want to test for things like whether there might be some impaired glucose tolerance, or what we call pre-diabetes. And that's a condition where the blood sugar is high, but it's not high enough to be type 2 diabetes just yet. If we don't make any changes, though, within about 10 years, that could become type 2 diabetes. We also want to look at our cholesterol levels as well, because having high cholesterol can increase the chance of clogged arteries, which limits our blood flow, and that increases our risk of things like stroke and heart attack. So where we can, we really want to prevent those kinds of things. Skin cancer checks. We should be having those yearly, and I don't mean the kind of check where you go to the doctor and say, oh, I've got a mole on the back of my hand, can you look at that? I'm worried about it. I'm talking about the kind of skin checks where you strip all the way down to your undies and they have a good look over your body. They usually use like a little dermoscope and will look front to back, left to right, and really have a good look for anything that could be causing concern. You can get skin cancers in areas that don't see the sun. So it might seem unusual that if you're not someone who sees a lot of sun, you would need to have this done, but I do encourage you to have that looked into. Then we've got the dentist. There's no general recommendation about how often people should go to the dentist because it's different for everyone, but roughly 6 to 12 monthly. You may be thinking, oh, I hate the dentist. I do too. I haven't been in the last 12 months either, but it's on my list and I do need to work on that. For females, we need to look at our cervical cancer screenings. So we used to have the Pap test, which was 3 yearly, but that's been replaced by the cervical screen test, which is now 5 yearly. And if you aren't up to date with that, I very much encourage you to get that sorted. For women that are over 50 years, we also look at mammograms for breast cancer screenings and preventions. We want to pick those up as soon as possible. For men and women, we have the bowel cancer screenings, which is the fecal occult blood test. You may have got a nice birthday present in the mail in the form of a little package that has the screening test in it. I do encourage you to do that because it's such a great way to pick up if there's anything going on. And whilst it might be uncomfortable to do the test at home, it's much better that we pick up any nasty stuff earlier rather than later. For the gents, we also want to look at prostate cancer. So have a chat with your doctor about if and when the right time to screen for that is, especially if you have a family history as well. Now, that's not everything. There are other things that we want to look at as well. Things like flu vaccines, for example, or getting your ears checked. So that's just a general idea of what could be included, but please have a chat with your GP to say, look, what should we be keeping an eye out for and how regularly should we be checking for things like that? Let's have a look at some MS-specific monitoring. Now, I've put a diagram here from the MS Brain Health Initiative, and it's an iceberg. The idea of this image is to show us that above the surface, we have a few things that we can see, but below the surface, we know the iceberg is always bigger. So regular monitoring is so important in MS. In general, it would be recommended that you might have an MRI once a year and see a neurologist for each person, but it's a general idea to have a look at. For some people, they may be living regionally or having quite stable MS, which means they don't need to be screened as often. But we do really encourage communication with your medical team. So informed, shared decision making. We also like the idea of an MS diary. So that will help you write down any of your symptoms, potential side effects from medications, and record anything that you think might be affecting your health at all. Let's have a look at the different components of health now, moving away from physical health. So let's have a look at intellectual health. This is about keeping your mind active. Today, you might be learning about health or learning about MS, but it also could be your employment. Perhaps you're in a paid employment situation or unpaid employment, such as being a stay-at-home parent or a carer, or perhaps you even do some volunteering. All of those things do help to keep our mind active. Being open-minded actually has benefit to our brain health, and so does face-to-face conversation actually. We know that there are some studies that show even 10 minutes of face-to-face conversation each day can improve our memory and cognition. Things to watch out for would be multitasking. So we often think we might be multitasking well, but often it's actually just us switching from one task to the other quite quickly. And when we do that, there's actually a cognitive cost to that. It can increase our stress hormone as well as that fight or flight response, adrenaline. And that can kind of overstimulate the brain and cause mental fog or scrambled thinking. Just as I was talking to you then, another alert popped up on my screen and I was multitasking and I could feel that happening in that moment. Sitting down for too long, we think this is actually detrimental to our brain health. And we think that even if you sit down for a long period of time and then get up and do some vigorous exercise, it's not the same as if you break up how long you're sitting down for. So if you are working from home or living a lifestyle where you need to sit down and rest quite a bit, see if you can break that up by just occasionally doing some movements or getting up and walking around if you're able to. Too much screen time is something we need to be mindful of, and also sleep deprivation. Certainly we know with sleep deprivation that it does impair our ability to make good choices, and it's really tough to want to be engaged in things when we are tired. Let's have a look at our emotional health. We're looking here at the ability to understand ourselves and cope with the challenges that life brings us. At the moment, there's lots of those. But are you able to have some degree of control over your emotions, your feelings, and your behaviours? There are some things we want to look out for here. Negative perfectionism is one of them. If you are someone who often focuses on the failures that you have, or having such a high standard that if you don't meet that, it's all no good, that is a really bad trait in terms of our emotional health, and is really something that would benefit from some self-compassion. Prolonged stress is also quite harmful. It can lead to wear and tear on the body, and it can even have some negative impacts on our physical health as well, actually. So we really want to be mindful of that prolonged stress, and I very much encourage you to look into things like mindfulness. There's a really great app called Smiling Mind, or meditations, or other things that can help bring down our stress levels, especially at the moment. I've also written prolonged low mood, and the reason I've used the word prolonged is because our health does change, and it's not abnormal to have low mood or stress. They're normal things to experience, but we don't want them to last for a really long time. So if you are noticing that you're feeling really stressed for a prolonged period of time or have low mood, I would encourage you to reach out perhaps to your GP and have a chat about some counselling or look into some support there. But it may be something like apathy, a lack of emotion or interest. So perhaps you don't feel low or sad or stressed, you just don't care. It's a real can't be bothered type of feeling. I'm not bothered by things that are stressful, but I'm also not bothered by things that usually make me happy. So that's something we want to look at. Also, if you have little to no physical activity or exercise, because if you're missing out on that, then you're missing out on an extra boost in your emotional health. And again, I've written poor sleep because it is just the thief of everything in terms of health. Let's have a look at social health. And as I said before, this is a big one for most of us at the moment with all the different ways we have to live during COVID. But social connectedness is a basic need to belong to a group or a community. Some of us are lucky enough to have strong, supportive families, but some of us aren't so lucky. If you're not a part of a supportive family or friendship network, then make sure you are linked into a system of support as well as you can be. We have a peer support program at MS, which is wonderful, and I really encourage you to link in with that. Some things to look out for would be isolation. And again, I'm sure you're sitting there going, well, I can't do much about that now. I know that you might not be able to see people face to face, but if you are feeling really isolated, do see what changes you can make in that area. And also feeling lonely. You can be in a room full of people and still feel lonely, so we want to look at that meaningful connection. But I've also put down unhealthy relationships. There are times where we know that there are some relationships that are actually harmful to us. We know that there's the extreme of domestic violence, which is a real problem in our community, but it doesn't have to be that extreme for it to be something that's not really good for us. It may even be that you have a relationship that causes you a lot of stress, or it may just not be a two-way street. Perhaps you put all the support and all the effort into a friendship, but all you get back is negativity. Have a think about if there are any bad influences in your life, or whether you're perhaps spending too much time on social media. It's great to be able to connect in with other people, but it's not the same as speaking to that friend on the phone, for example. So do be mindful of that. There are studies that show relationships are having great benefits on short-term health as well as long-term health. And we know a person who is lonely is 50% more likely to die prematurely than a person with healthy social relationships. So it is an important thing to work at over time. Let's have a look at environmental health. Where we live and how we live, it does matter. A safe and secure environment where our basic needs are met is so important. You should feel comfortable, you should feel secure and safe, and that's critical to our health and well-being. Your home can influence your mood, it can impact your behavior, it can reduce your stress or cause you stress, and it actually changes the way you interact with the wider world. Your environment may have dramatically changed with COVID-19. I know me and Andrea have worked from home since March, so what makes up our physical environment has drastically changed, and many of us are spending much more time in our homes. And I'd be interested to know if you've made any adaptations in your home, and are you getting enough sunshine, fresh air and vitamin D, even though you're stuck at home? We also want to think about if there's any pollution. So most of us would be quite fortunate to have access to things like fresh drinking water and not having too much sound or air pollution, but they are things to consider. Now let's have a look at our spiritual health. We're thinking about things like a sense of hope or purpose, direction and resolve, that kind of never give up attitude. And that is often fueled or sustained by our belief in something more. This belief can give us that sense of strength or courage and help us get through the challenging times. For some of us, it might be through formal religion, but for others, it might just be a personal belief or a sense of meaning to your life that fits in a greater picture. Perhaps you believe in karma, or you believe in someone looking over us to make sure that things will work out in the end. Perhaps you believe that the obstacles in life are challenges or times for personal growth. There's no right or wrong way to think about that, but it is a big part of how we feel. Let's have a look at some MS specific information. So to live well with MS, we really need you to focus on all the standard parts of healthy living, but I've also put here some information specific to brain health. So some of those things specifically would be diet. There's no one diet in MS that's proven to be more beneficial than any others, but we believe a really healthy, well-balanced diet that's high in fiber, potentially low fat, and is less processed or more on the naturally processed side. In terms of weight, we do know that obesity is linked with worse outcomes in MS. If you are overweight or obese, you're in good company. Most of us are overweight or obese, unfortunately, in Australia, but it is something that is linked with poorer outcomes. So if you can make any changes in that space, you may well notice that you do feel better physically, but that your MS is better off. In terms of exercise, we know that it can have specific benefits on our brain. Higher levels of aerobic fitness are actually associated with faster information processing and preserved brain tissue volume. So with MS, we know that the brain can decrease in volume over time a little bit faster than normal. So without MS, our brains do start to get smaller from our kind of mid-20s onwards. But with MS, sometimes that can happen a little bit faster. So when we're talking about brain health, we're talking about supporting our brain to be as healthy as possible. Smoking, we do know that it's linked with worse outcomes in MS. It's really tough to give up smoking, and I'm not at all sitting here with judgment, but if you do smoke and have MS, I'd really encourage you to think about whether you can start that conversation with a family member, a friend, a doctor, call me and have a chat about how you might go about quitting. There's lots of support and resources there for you. Sleep, it is the foundation to everything. So we really do want you to have a good sleep overnight. Keeping your mind active is really beneficial, especially long term. It can actually prevent some cognitive problems in MS. And stress and mood are big ones as well. It is hard to make positive choices when you are stressed. We do know that success will build on success and failure will build on failures. So if you do focus on your failures here, they can kind of seem to get worse. And I know this sounds like a lot, but you're probably doing most of the right things already. So let's have a look at some of the barriers though, because it's not easy to do all of this stuff. Think about what your barriers may be. These are all things that I hear day to day. Maybe you can't afford it. Maybe you don't know what to do. You might think, I'm too tired, or I have a number of health conditions that make it all too hard. I don't have time to do any of this stuff. I'm not motivated. Or it might just be that you have MS and that's the barrier for you. You may think that exercising will make your MS worse or make your fatigue worse, or that everything that's contributing to your poor health is MS related and there's not much I need to do with my general health. It is hard to overcome some of these things. We know that some of these are myths. So for example, exercising is actually good for fatigue, but there's also some things here that may be a bit more difficult to overcome. But focus on what we can overcome and put your focus here. That's the important part of this. Some of the top tips here, have a look at all the components of health. If you're wanting to make some changes and see if you can live a little bit better, have an overall holistic view. I wanted to write set and forget, but really it's set and remember. So set up regular appointments with your GP, with your skin clinic, with your dentist, whoever that may be, and keep that going so that you do follow that schedule. Do have a sense of self-compassion. None of this is about looking at ourselves in the mirror and saying, I'm not good enough, or I'm not doing a good job, I'm a failure. But it's about saying, hey, I probably could do a tiny bit better here and I deserve it, so let me see what I can do. We are all a work in progress though, so just keep at it. I loved this quote that I put here. If you try and fail, congratulations, because most people don't even try. And I can't emphasize that enough. I don't know how many diets I've started and failed. That's not the point. The point is that we continue to keep trying making positive changes. So in summary, we want to be realistic. That's so important. We want to be kind to ourselves, but also look at slow and steady changes. These do set you up for longer lasting benefits. Take a break when you need to, but keep going. And some final food thought. This is my favorite quote that I found when I was writing this webinar. Tomorrow is a new day. You shall begin it serenely and with too high a spirit to be encumbered by any of your old nonsense. But also, I love this little picture of a raccoon, which says, I need to live healthier. And then a picture of it running across with a little jar of peanut butter, which I think is all of us sometimes. So that's it for my presentation, Andrea. Do we have any questions coming through? Or a poll?
Thanks,
I think we have.
Yeah, we're gonna have a little poll, and then we're going to open to questions. So we thought we'd ask you what you're going to do from here. So it's great to have, and thank you, Jane, fabulous information in that presentation and lots of things for us to think about. But it's always good if we have a little action to take away with us. So that is the question now. What will you do from here? Are you going to talk to your GP about your health checks? Perhaps you're going to explore more stress management strategies. Or maybe you're thinking, actually, I need to explore a way of connecting more with others. Maybe you picked up on the idea of the MS diary or some way of tracking your symptoms so that you can have those conversations with your GP and your neurologist. Or if you've got another idea, pop it in that question area so that we can see that as a comment. That would be great. But hopefully you've got something that you've jotted down that you've thought, yeah, that's really important. I need to revisit that, or I've never thought about that before. And so you're going to do some further exploration. As Jane said, this is a high-level overview. There's lots of further information available on the website if you want to dive deeper into any of the things that Jane talked about today. And we would encourage that. I'll just show you, and be encouraged, you're all not alone. Some people are going to talk to their GP regarding their health checks. That's fantastic. And a whole lot of people thinking about exploring stress management. That is brilliant. Well done. And we've got someone looking at exploring ways of connecting more, and I'll give you a suggestion on that in a second. And a lot of people thinking that idea of the diary to monitor your MS is great. And then we've got some comments coming through as well. So that's wonderful. So this is our time for questions, and I'll give you a couple of minutes by going through a couple of other little slides just to give you that buffer so that you can type your questions and comments in. MS Connect is always here for you, 8:30 till 6. The girls are there to answer your phone calls, and if you need to leave a message, please leave a message and let them know when you'd prefer them to call back. They can do that, and they're wonderful at responding to your messages. We talked about that, the importance of connecting with others, and peer support is a fabulous way of doing that. If you're not already involved in peer support, we would encourage you to think about that, whether it's one-on-one phone support with another person living with MS who is a trained peer. That can be arranged, or it might be that you would like to connect with a group of people, get a variety of opinions and ideas and share that amongst the group. So on the screen there you can see Kat and Kim and Ange. They're our 3 peer support coordinators, and they would be really happy to talk to you about a group that would be suitable for you. There's a couple of other tools on our website that you might find helpful. Get Your Act Together is a tool that you answer a few questions around your symptoms, and it gives you some strategies and ideas for managing various symptoms. When we were talking before about the barriers, it brought to mind that I was really pleased that there's a couple of slides here that can be ways to overcome some of the barriers that get in the way of us living well. The Employment Support Service is a fabulous program for anyone who's working to connect with support to continue working. It's the whole idea of the program. And a lot of people tap into healthy lifestyle approaches because that helps them maintain their work. So keep that in mind. As too does NDIS. If people are under 65 and on an NDIS plan, that can be a great way to overcome some of the usual barriers that stop us pursuing the things that help us live well. If you're over 65, that might be through My Aged Care, and we can help you navigate that system as well. So let's have a look at the questions and comments that have come in. Jane, one comment that came in earlier was around the importance in this instance of Sandra's hairdresser, because it was actually her hairdresser that noticed that there was a lesion on her scalp that meant that she went to a dermatologist and found that that could be treated. So that's great. They can see places you can't, said Sandra.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a great lesson and a reminder. Sorry, I'm just reading as I'm processing. So in terms of thinking about the meaning and purpose in life, when you're managing day to day, the meaning and purpose, the question is, can the meaning and purpose come from simply living your best life with MS? But I think you've actually answered that in your question. Absolutely it can. That's all we can do. That's fantastic. So yeah, and a comment about sometimes life can be in turmoil. So any of these topics or suggestions, you can revisit them whenever it's appropriate. And I would say revisit them periodically. These are always the things that we need to check back in on. How am I going in that area? Haven't thought about that area for a while. What's going on here? So absolutely, absolutely. And that was probably in response to the what am I going to do now? So maybe it's park it, but remember to come back to it.
And give yourself permission to do that as well. I think that's so important. And you know, what made up your healthy lifestyle before COVID changes may be different now. I know a lot of people, for example, that did weight resistance training at the gym. There are ways you can do it at home. You can buy equipment and you can do stuff, but it's just a bit fussy. So if you think, you know what, for the next 3 months, I'm probably not going to do that, that's all right. Give yourself permission to put that aside, but take it back up when you can. And I think when life does get tough, that is a really good time to say, what's on my plate that I could shift aside just for the moment? So I think that's a really good idea.
Absolutely. And it's a good segue, a question there about, are there physiotherapists specifically for people with MS, particularly around pain management and exercise? And yes, the answer to that is yes. And in actual fact, the MS physiotherapy and exercise physiology service that used to be only ever based at Lidcombe in New South Wales are now offering telehealth appointments. So that is a fantastic initiative that's actually come out of COVID, that now people anywhere can access a telehealth appointment. So some people pay for that privately, and some people use their NDIS funding to pay for that telehealth appointment. But what I'll do is I'll send to everyone the little the information sheets about the telehealth that's now available. That's great.
I think, Andrea, we've also got a great webinar on our website by a pain specialist physiotherapist. It's a really good one. I learned a lot by watching that. So I think that's a really good resource as well.
Great. Yeah. It's always a good reminder. There's lots more to learn and lots more things to consider. Thanks everyone for your comments and the questions that have come through. And thank you, Jane, so much for your time today and in putting that material together. Another little reminder's popped in that that doing art with a group on Zoom is fantastic. Socially and for cognitive and fine motor skills. That's wonderful. Great suggestion. Thank you for that one. There's an amazing array of things that you can tap into that fit your interests as well as just are beneficial for your whole experience of living well and living better. So thank you everyone again for being part of the program today. We'll look forward to seeing you at future programs along the way. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you.